It is indeed wonderful to see you all here. When I was writing this yesterday, I actually said on this bleaky Wednesday afternoon because we did have a tropical wave passing by, but that's no longer the case. But we are still at the beginning of the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. We also welcome everyone across the Caribbean and further afield watching us live this afternoon via UWITV. So welcome all our brothers and sisters across the Caribbean and indeed across the world. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge some persons with us today. Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, our Minister of Finance and Public Service here in Jamaica, Ms. Sandra Maynard, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global Affairs UWI, Ms. Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, Archbishop Kenneth Richards, Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Kingston, Dr. Terence Walters, National Disaster Coordinator, National Disaster Management Agency, Grenada, Dr. Omar Davies, former Minister of Finance, Jamaica, and the Minister at the time of Hurricane Ivan, Dr. Barbara Carby, former Director General, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management of Jamaica, Mr. J.B. Collier, Program Leader, Sustainable Development for the Caribbean at the World Bank Group, Mr. Stephen Lawrence, Country Representative, Caribbean Development Bank, our board members who are here with us today, CRIF board members, Ms. Sandra Bailey, our Deputy Chairperson for CRIF SPC, CRIF board member Mariam Robinson, and our own CEO, Mr. Isaac Anthony. I also extend a special welcome to everyone who is here this afternoon, spending the rest of the afternoon with us into the evening. This Resilience Dialogue and Time Capsule event being held today is part of the broader Ivan Plus 20 initiative, which is being implemented this year under the theme, Remembering the Past, Reflecting on the Present, and Visioning for the Future. Resilience, Adaptation, and Sustainability in Caribbean SIDS. It was launched in March in the Cayman Islands with the support of the government of the Cayman Islands, including the Premier. The Resilience Dialogue and Time Capsule event today is being hosted by CRIF in collaboration with the UWI, one of the many Ivan Plus 20 partners. Today is also another important day on our calendar. Anybody knows? Other than my friend Ainsley Henry or JB. It's World Environment Day. As we all know, when we protect our planet, we do secure our future because we build resilience to several natural hazards. The Resilience Dialogue today is a great way to close off our World Environment Day celebrations. But before I continue, I am Elizabeth Emmanuel, and I lead the CRIF Technical Assistance and Corporate Communications Management teams of CRIF. As I see many familiar faces, colleagues, and friends, and once again, we welcome you. You will notice that in our audience this afternoon, there are a number of young people. They are sort of dispersed. We would have loved to invite a number of schools, but it is 4:30 or 5 o'clock that we're starting an event, and we decided that we would not do that because of the safety of our children. But instead, we've asked parents, we've asked to bring their children, grandchildren to participate, learn early. We're learning from Minister Clark. You see, he goes around and he teaches everybody about the budget. It's not too early to learn about the matters of resilience because we do these things because we know that tomorrow you are the ones who are going to be here. You're going to be the Minister Clarks, and you're going to be the Sandra Baileys, and the CEOs of CRIF, and the head of SEDEMA. So welcome, welcome all. My job today is quite simple, to lead us seamlessly through today's agenda. So let us begin. First off, what is Ivan Plus 20? Let us sit back and view a short video feature that highlights the key aspects of this initiative.
Presenting Ivan Plus 20, remembering the past, reflecting on the present, and visioning for the future. 20 years since Ivan. resilience, adaptation, and sustainability in Caribbean small island developing states. The island is devastated. In many places, beyond imagination and recognition. Buildings, houses, crops, and infrastructure have been either damaged or destroyed. Many lives have been lost. The psychological impact on people and communities is unimaginable. This picture was on repeat in September 2004, when Hurricane Ida devastated Grenada and the Cayman Islands, resulting in economic losses which totaled close to 200% of their annual GDP. Another 7 countries in the Caribbean were also severely impacted. Regional losses for this natural disaster event totaled over $6 billion. 2024 represents 20 years since Hurricane Ida. It represents time for us as a region to look back, reflect on the present, and vision for a more resilient and sustainable future for our people. IVAN Plus 20 presents that platform in which government, regional organizations, academia, the private sector, development partners, civil society organizations, and importantly, you will come together to implement a range of activities to foster and scale up resilience and sustainability. Come join us and be a part of think tanks, time capsule events, a Caribbean Lessons Learned Day, a donor conference roundtable, Caribbean Resilience Dialogues, regional children's events on resilience, regional youth events, and a commemorative technical paper series. Let us work together to collectively create a region that is a best practice example for other islands and coastal states globally. IVAN Plus 20, Resilience, Adaptation, and Sustainability in Caribbean Small Island Developing States.
As I mentioned earlier, the Resilience Dialogue, this is the first Resilience Dialogue that is being held under IVAN 20 plus 20, and it is a collaborative effort of CRIF and the UWI. It is therefore befitting for both organizations to kickstart the main part of our event today by bringing brief remarks. I will first call on Ms. Sandra Maynard, Pro Vice Chancellor, Global Affairs at the University, to bring remarks, and she will be immediately followed by Mr. Isaac Anthony, CEO of CRIF. Sandra.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. A warm welcome to you all. And firstly, I'm going to say we had a very long list of extremely impressive individuals who are here with us today. So I'm going to simply observe and adopt all previous protocols. As I'm instructed, we're going to keep brief remarks. So first of all, I would like to say that I'm very pleased to be here and partnering with CRIF as part of the Resilience Dialogue and remembering the theme of IVAN Plus 20. Now, this initiative continues a long-standing institutional relationship with CRIF, and this is a very valued partnership between the UWI and CRIF SPC. So we have had a number of activities that we have conducted together, including scholarship support for our undergraduate and postgraduate students, and we do appreciate the significant contributions that CRIF has made over the years, and I can say that they are very supportive and very student-led and really investing in the future. Now, back to the events of this afternoon. Now, of course, IVAN devastated the region, and particularly looking at the impact that it has had on a number of different Caribbean islands. Now, when IVAN struck, a call went out. And a call went out to the university, and the university experts responded. And the then Vice-Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Professor E. Nigel Harris, then mobilised a number of staff with expertise in disaster management and mitigation from all the then 3 campuses that the UWI had into the relief task force. The response was rapid and it was effective. Those experts were drawn from all subject disciplines, including areas such as earth sciences, health, agriculture, housing, waste management, everything that is needed to help in rebuilding. As a result of that came the Disaster Risk Reduction Centre, and known as the DRRC, emerged out of the mobilisation of those particular experts and still continues till today. By this, we acknowledged the need for that multidisciplinary training, research and technical expertise, particularly in disaster management, risk reduction within the Caribbean, and of course, we're in a region prone to a range of those climate-related risks. Now, the DRRC supports the work of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which I'm going to say we are going to hear from later today, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And the centre offers a multidisciplinary integrated approach to training, outreach and research. Now, what the UWI has done, it has further developed and extended its contribution to the climate change and resilience dialogue. Examples of these have been in areas such as the Global Institute for Climate, Smart and Resilient Development. And that facility facilitates training, learning, applied research and knowledge sharing to support limiting the global warming to 1.5%. And I know that, oh, my belt's disappeared, sorry, that's fine. That's, lunch was too much at that stage. Right, I'm going to stay quiet, right, I'll breathe more lightly. Right, so we also have, I know that we have Professor Michael Taylor here that I'm sure has certainly done a lot of research work in relation to that. Another example of a new venture that we are embarking upon is the Centre for Excellence in Oceanography and the Blue Economy, COBE. And additionally, we have a number of other UWI agencies that, such as CERMES, that also supports the activities and work that we do in respect of resilience and also crisis and climate risk management. So we have, and I'll say this, the UWI has the most number of experts from a single institution globally that has contributed to reports such as the IPCC reports, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That is a significant achievement from a regional institution. And thank you for appreciating that. And just to round up on this matter, we had SIDS last week, and some of you, I know I met there, and I was very pleased to see you again. And we had a contingent of over 24 academics and leaders from the University of West Indies that participated in the SIDS conference in Antigua. And I say this, that the Vice-Chancellor had said, and he opined, that the UWI has been in the vanguard of the sustainable development discourse for more than 2 decades. And our academics continue to actively engage with policymakers and practitioners in devising innovative solutions for our region. It is a point of pride, he describes, for me to note the diverse disciplines and considerable expertise that the UWI team members attending to SIDS brings to bear on addressing the unique challenges of our Caribbean countries in achieving their sustainable development targets. And I know we've mentioned the SDGs, and they are going to be part of our existence and should certainly be part of our young people and their development. Now, within the Caribbean and globally, we have UWI partners and numerous agencies to achieve resilience to support and protect lives and livelihoods against natural disasters and climate poverty. For example, I mentioned SEDIMA earlier, and I'm going to quote Ms. Elizabeth Riley, who's here today, that in 2021, when we re-signed our MOU between the institutions, she said that as institutions, SEDIMA and the UWI share a regional remit and global outlook. Our institutions share a vision as agents of transformational development change, driving the cultural shift to safety and resilience to diverse hazards through research, policy, and practice. So looking at our region's climate vulnerability, we have to improve our resilience to disaster risks by supporting the institutionalization of comprehensive disaster management. And finally, I do commend CRIF for its commitment and look forward to the activities for the coming year. Thank you so much. And I'm going to delicately bend and take my belt. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon to all. Protocol having been established, let me say that, it's always a pleasure to be in Jamaica. As they say, Jamaica nice. Nice as in Lucia. But I'm particularly pleased that, the first resilience dialogue under the Ivan 20 series of events is actually being held here, right here in Jamaica. And for two reasons. Number one, I think maybe not much is known by the fact that Ivan also affected Jamaica severely. Yes, Grenada and Cayman were by far the worst, but there was a fairly significant amount of impact in Jamaica. The other point I would like to make is that the government of Jamaica actually played a very instrumental role in the implementation and certainly the operationalization of CRIF, for which, of course, they must be commended. And, of course, you're going to be hearing a bit more about this later. But why Ivan 20 series of activities? It was at the CRIF board meeting in September 2023. The board and management reflected on the fact that 2024 would be 20 years since Hurricane Ivan. And it was Hurricane Ivan that led to the establishment of CRIF in the year 2007 and introduced parametric insurance to the Caribbean, making disaster risk financing now a more common part of the development landscape. I will go further to say that it was Ivan that helped make parametric insurance a globally recognized instrument for managing disaster risk. And so it was out of this board meeting that it was agreed that we would lead an initiative in 2024 that would allow partners in disaster risk management and disaster risk financing. And indeed, all of us, one, to bring into greater focus the best practices and lessons learned from not only Ivan, but from other major hazard events such as Irma and Maria around comprehensive disaster risk management, CDRM, in the region, including linkages with financial protection. Collectively agree on the past CDRM landscape has shaped current Caribbean development, defining and adopting the lessons learned and best practices, and creating the pathway for our past experiences to shape a resilient Caribbean. Create a space from improved dialogue around CDRM in the region, pulling together several agencies and governments to share best practices and lessons learned that can be adopted and adapted by countries in the region. And finally, bring together youth in the region to help chart a resilient future collectively. Internally to us at CRIF, this initiative became known as IVAN Plus 20. We keep up with the theme, remembering the past, reflecting on the present, and visioning for the future, 20 years since IVAN, resilient adaptation, sustainability in the Caribbean, SIDS. The idea was not to celebrate Hurricane Ivan, but to recognize and to salute the many great actions that came out of Ivan, starting with the collective political will demonstrated by CARICOM heads of government at the time to move to establish a disaster risk financing mechanism for the region, which eventually led to the creation of CRIF. While IVAN Plus 20 was conceptualized by CRIF, we welcome the partnership and engagement of several government and regional organizations in taking this initiative forward during the course of the year. Currently, our IVAN 20 partners span regional organizations such as the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDMA, and of course we're very pleased to have the Executive Director attend this event. Also the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, CIMH, the University of the West Indies, the University of Technology, and the governments of the Cayman Islands, Grenada, Jamaica, among others. There is also strong interest from the development partner community. In March this year, we officially launched IVAN Plus 20 in the Cayman Islands, led by Premier the Honorable Juliana O'Connelly, Premier and also the Minister of Finance and Economic Development in that country. This launch signaled our commitment as a region to come together to launch this series of events to be rolled out under IVAN Plus 20, to collectively restate our commitments to ensuring that we never forget and we push forward collectively as governments, academia, private sector, civil society organizations, and our next generation of leaders, the youth, to take charge and create the resilient and sustainable future we want. But let me turn a bit to Ivan and CRIF. Ivan was a Cape Verde-type hurricane that moved through the region in September 2004 and affected several countries in the Caribbean simultaneously, resulting in the loss of more than 60 lives in the region and losses in excess of 60 or $6 billion US dollars. Ivan brought into sharp focus the need for quick liquidity following a natural disaster. With a grant from the government of Japan, sourced by the Minister of Finance at the time, Dr. Omar Davis, and we're very happy to have him in attendance, and administered through the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, CARICOM governments, with the support of technocrats across the region and the World Bank, sought to undertake studies that would fill this need for liquidity following a natural disaster. Some of these technocrats, certainly some of the team from CGM Gallagher, are here with us today, and of course we commend them for their hard work, as I was saying to Mr. Pragdel just before the start of this event. These studies led to the development of the world's first multi-country, multi-peril risk pool based on parametric insurance. Parametric insurance was the instrument of choice as it fits the needs of CARICOM governments, That is, it provides access to liquidity within 2 weeks of a natural disaster. This represented the birth of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, or CRIF, in 2007, 3 years following Hurricane Ivan, now known as CRIF SPC. And I must acknowledge the support of the international development partners, some of whom are here with us today. From its inception and the initial capitalization through to the present day, as we continue to expand the development of new products, CRIF has been supported by governments such as the government of Japan, mentioned earlier, and the government of Canada, the UK, France, USA, Germany, Ireland, and Mexico, as well as the European Union, the World Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank. Our success is due in large measure to your belief in CRIF. There was no dispute as to the role of other agencies. Indeed, CRIF was designed to complement other important national disaster offices and the regional entities such as CDIMA. They too continue to be critical in comprehensive disaster risk management, and again you'll hear from Liz on that. But within the CDRM equation, CRIF plays a key role in helping countries to address financial protection and gain access to quick liquidity to support the immediate needs following those events. We are proud of CRIF's success, of which there are many. CRIF started out in 2007 with 16 members from the Caribbean. Today, CRIF has 26 from the Caribbean and Central America, inclusive of 3 Caribbean electric utilities. And we are about to announce some new members that have joined us in this policy year, which started on the weekend of June 1. One such member is a tourist attraction, and I'm sure you're very curious. In 2007, CRIF provided coverage for tropical cyclone and earthquake. Today, we also provide coverage for excess rainfall and fisheries and electric, as well as water utilities, offering a total of 6 parametric insurance products. Also, the model of underpinning our parametric insurance products continue to strengthen and upgraded based on new data and new modeling approaches. I am proud to say that our models are fully owned by CRIF, properly customized for the Caribbean and Central America, more adequately reflecting the risk profile of our members, and they are not off-the-shelf models. We are also seeing members increasing coverage, partly due to wariness about uncertainty that climate change brings, and partly because of the recognition that disaster risk financing instruments are key to reducing budget volatility following a natural disaster and can safeguard current and further development prospects. For the last 4 years, we have provided coverage to our members in excess of over 1 billion, and the figure is actually closer to 1.2 billion. This year alone, coverage increased by 10% compared to last year. And I'm pleased to say that all our members have renewed their policies, including the government of Jamaica. Since the inception of CRIF, we have made 64 individual payouts totaling $268 million to 17 members and have benefited as many as 3.5 million persons. The use of parametric insurance for natural catastrophes has grown significantly across the world, in large measure to the performance of CRIF. Today, there are 3 other risk pools. One in Africa, called the African Risk Capacity, the one in the Pacific, as well as one in Southeast Asia, all of which were actually modeled on the CRIF. Today, parametric insurance is being recognized as key to financing loss and damage due to climate change. CRIF is now recognized as a leading development insurance company, providing parametric insurance products to Caribbean and Central America, but also supporting the socio-economic development and resilient building efforts of the regions that it serves. As an organization, we can do more, and we are currently looking at approaches to scaling up. Scaling up meaning increasing membership, increasing products, increasing coverage, and as well as in scaling up CRIF as an organization. I'm pleased that along with our partners, we are leading the charge to remember and reflect on Ivan and to collectively look towards the next 20 years to build on the progress we have made as a region and to advance our resilient and sustainable development agenda. And finally, as the CEO of this organization, and I must say that I feel very privileged to be leading this organization as the CEO, let me extend on behalf of myself and the board of directors of CRIF a warm welcome to you all. We are very appreciative of you spending time with us today to engage in discussions in what promises to be a very interesting dialogue. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Isaac. Of course, those figures that Isaac spoke about, coverage of 1.2 billion US dollars. So all his figures were in US dollars, just to make that clear. We are speaking about Hurricane Ivan. Let us take a moment and look back at Hurricane Ivan. Today, Ivan is well remembered, especially for those who suffered the ultimate loss, the loss of a loved one. Let us go back in time.
What the experience, brother. What the experience of all. I tell you when you all put through the window, some tree have been way over and I've been up with them and come back straight the same way. Jesus, so some of the roof lift off there. Tree are root up, man. Check it out, man. Check out Ivan. I'm at the boss of the tree root, you know. You know what them time when me I say, Father God, I want you help me. Prayer was my only source. Them time when me I tell you, come so God alone something big light in a flash, some big Z. You know me I turn down, roll like, get the God a dry cheer.
I forgive God thanks that we're still alive.
I will like to call forward Archbishop Kenneth Richards to lead us in a prayer and a moment of silence.
could I be permitted to just ask some questions? One, you know, when we come to conferences like these, we have so many acronyms that some laypersons don't know what they mean. I know that it is Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. I don't know what the SPC means. Okay. And the other question, why Ivan and not Gilbert? That's a question. Let us pray. Lord, created in your image and likeness, human nature is resilient. And so we all have the ability to actualize the capacity to face challenges reasonably well and can adapt over time survival skills in the face of disaster. And people can sometimes experience positive changes after disasters. Challenges and disasters may cause us to rethink what is truly important and come to appreciate what we must value most in life. Therefore, Lord, when we are uncertain about what we should do, show us your ways. When we do not know which way to turn, teach us and show us. In everything we do, we ask you to guide our people. We want to trust you. We ask that you protect our island homes in the Caribbean. And so we declare, praying Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Let us now pause for a moment of silence as we remember those who have been affected, 60 lives that were lost, those who were affected by loss of property, those who are traumatized by the experience. A moment of silence for these persons. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. For those who lost their life, Lord, grant eternal rest to them. And those who are traumatized, we ask that you'll continue to grant peace. May they always find support to accompany them. Amen.
I'd just like to inform that former Prime Minister, the Honorable P.J. Patterson, we would like to thank him because he did provide us some strategic guidance as we were putting together Ivan Plus 20. And while today was a very hard day for him, given some other duties he had to carry out earlier in the day. He did record a message, which we will upload to the Ivan Plus 20 website to allow persons to view his reflection. At this point, don't put them behind me, we are going to get into the panels. We have one panel, but we refer to it as a rotating panel. So the concept of this resilience panel, the panel, of course, is being chaired by Professor Michael Taylor. Prof, your chair is not up here as yet, but it's coming, so you can proceed to come up. Professor Michael Taylor is a professor of climate science, and he's the dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology here in Jamaica. He is a world-renowned expert in climate science who has been named among Apolitical's 100 most influential academics in government. You know, when you get those fields all over. You must be so proud of your dad, right? His two children are here with him. Professor Taylor was a coordinating lead author for the special report on 1.5 degrees produced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. Professor Taylor is also the co-director of the Climate Studies Group MONA, which he has successfully positioned as a center of regional thought and expertise with respect to climate change science as the lead center for coordinating regional climate modeling efforts. I invite you, Prof. Taylor, to come forward. I could have taken the whole day to read, but please bear with me. Please welcome. As I said before, this panel is designed as a rotating panel and divided into two parts. The first set of panelists will spend the next half hour focusing on Hurricane Ivan, its impacts, lessons learned, and how it shaped the comprehensive disaster risk management landscape in the region. I now invite this first set of panelists to come forward. Dr. Omar Davies, Dr. Barbara Carby, who said to me, Liz, I can talk for the whole day, so half an hour is... She is the former Director General of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management for Jamaica. Dr. Terence Walters, the current National Disaster Coordinator of the National Disaster Management Agency, Grenada. And you would notice that we do have an extra seat, right? And that's not because we didn't have two chairs, but it's called an open chair, and you would see it on your agenda. So to ensure that our proceedings today are engaging and that you actually you can bring your perspective and you can contribute, there is an open seat here. So in addition to the mics, and in addition to the rotating mics, please feel free and join the conversation. Don't frighten them, though. But bring your perspectives if there is a moment that you want to say something. Or you can raise your hands as well. It's yours.
All right, thank you very much, Liz. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me begin by thanking Chris for asking me to do this moderation. This is not my normal role. As you know, I'm a scientist, as you have heard. And as scientists, one of the things we love to do is throw out equations, but I'm going to refrain from the equation because we already have one, Ivan plus 20. So I don't think I need to give the equation again this afternoon. But I have to tell you, I'm intimidated because when you look in this room, if you turn around and just take a look at the persons in this room from the front to the back, and certainly when you look on this illustrious panel, who we have in this room represents what I would call the kings and queens of disaster risk management in the Caribbean. And I think, even before we start, the people in this room and the people on this panel deserve a round of applause. these are the people who, the capacity and the expertise we have relied on and we are continuing to rely on when we talk resilience. Thank you all, and certainly thank you, panelists, for your contributions. But let's get into it. We want to have a dialogue, as you have heard, and we want it to really be a conversation, if we can try to do that. And for this first section of the panel, what we really want to do is to look back on Ivan. So I'm calling this first panel the Ivan Stories. And we want to hear both from your personal and your professional roles, the experience of going through Ivan before, during, and certainly after. And then we want to see if we can tease out what Ivan therefore meant for the region. And to put you at ease, and maybe because I think very often, especially when we have disaster professionals on the panel, we go straight to asking them about their professional role and their professional role in a disaster. Allow me to ask you first about the personal experience with Ivan. What am I asking you? If you can think back to Ivan, and you as a person now, not in the particular role that you were playing and that we have been introduced to you as, is there a vivid memory that you have about the experience before, during, after, maybe impacting your family? What is that personal memory? Because disasters are about personal experiences as much as they're about the professional roles that we play. I don't know who wants to start. I can pick if you. All right, Dr. Carby, would you like to start us off?
All right. Well,
you may want to hold up the mic so that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, so for Ivan, one of my biggest worries was that I wasn't sure I had prepared enough at home because I was busy with other kinds of preparedness, as you can imagine. One funny story, though. My mother was, elderly at the time, so I couldn't leave her at home alone. So we shipped her off to a friend. So, in the height of the hurricane, you can only very briefly say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Fine. Mm-hmm. And that's the end of it. About two or 3 days afterwards, I got home, and my mother wasn't there. So I'm asking, where is Mommy, Oh, she hasn't come home yet. So I call her. What happened? Why aren't you home? Well, her friend's house was located on a road with a slope, and all the water had run down. So the entire house was surrounded by water, and they were marooned in the house. Oh. So I said to her, and you didn't call Odd Pem? Everybody had a good laugh at that.
Okay, and it's very interesting because what you're sharing with us is that in a disaster, certainly you were leading Odd Pem at the time, but your own family, was impacted. So much so, I don't know if you heard that she said a few days later when she reached home, which tells you about that experience. But any other personal experiences?
Well, interestingly, Grenada, we had not experienced a hurricane since 1955. So it was an entire generation,
yes,
okay, that did not know anything about hurricane. And you would hear the sentiments, well, I want to experience a hurricane.
Yes, you're almost preempting me with a question I'm coming with. But yes.
Okay, so there were many people who wanted to experience
Were you one of those persons?
Yes, at some point. At some point, okay. Yes, okay. And so we did not know what to expect. Okay, I mean, although yes, there was information being provided, but except for a few persons in the population who experienced a hurricane in other countries, but we did not know what to expect. So, and then a lot of the homes were built in the 60s, 70s after Ivan. Okay, so they were not built according to standard.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we lost so many roofs. Okay, the house I was in.
Right, can I ask you where you were?
Right, so I was home, there was 10 of us, 5 adults, 5 children, the youngest being 10 months old. and the entire roof of the house went just a few minutes after the hurricane started. And we sheltered in the bathroom area, and there was debris falling all around us. But, I mean, I think
10 of you in the bathroom area.
right in the bathroom, just in front, in that area where, in front of the bathroom. All right, my grandmother.
Dr. Davis says it had to be a big bathroom.
Yeah, I don't understand how we fit there, right?
Right.
But it was my grandmother, my sister, my wife, my daughter, her children, and you know, and yeah, so there was things breaking all over
All around.
the house. But fortunately, I mean, the grace of God, nothing hit us. Right inside the toilet area, a 2x4 plank came in right there, but nothing hit us. So that was my personal experience.
Thank you.
With Hurricane Ivan.
So again, the terror, you know, for the persons, even though you are, you know, you are seasoned disaster preparedness persons. Dr. Davis, do you have a personal experience before we move on? You may want to use the mic.
Yes, first about preparations at home. There are a couple of people here who may have known my wife, who she ran things.
Okay.
And she felt that I was, well, she's passed, so I won't comment as to whether she was right or wrong. But she felt that whenever my being around didn't help.
Didn't help at all with the preparation. Okay.
So that's one. So I wasn't around much with the preparations, but the Archbishop asked me why Ivan and not Gilbert, and that's one of the things which struck me. When it came to Ivan, I say I've seen worse than this, you know, because I thought Gilbert was in terms of
severity and intensity,
yes.
right?
So it almost seemed been there, done that. But so that's I didn't view it that. It was after I started seeing the reports out of Grenada, Haiti, and then it happened that I was speaking on behalf of, in the following September, I was speaking on behalf of the Caribbean finance ministers at the IMF World Bank meeting. So most of my presentation was about Grenada, and I'd like to come back to that later, rather than about Jamaica.
Sure.
Because what had hit Grenada in terms of damage and impact on infrastructure as well as the economy was much worse than that which affected Jamaica.
Okay, but what you're saying, Dr. Davis, is your personal experience was you were safe because it was your wife who took care of everything.
No,
but that's okay, Dr. Davis.
I have no problem. She would have me say that.
Right. And in truth, we laugh, but in disasters, you know that, especially in the region, it is women and the female-headed households that carry, you know, the families through. But Dr. Walters, you were touching on something that I wanted to move on to, you know, in your professional roles now. The truth is that when Ivan hit, Jamaica had not had a serious hit, again, since Gilbert, which was 1988. Though, interestingly, a month before, I think we had a heavy rain event that actually did some damage. Don't worry, Dr. Carby. and same for Grenada, that prior to Ivan, you had not had anything before. I think it was Lenny or maybe 1999. You know, so there was this kind of tremendous gap leading up to Ivan. Do you think that the country, in your professional opinion now, was prepared for an Ivan, whether it be Grenada or whether it was Jamaica? And this is in spite of what you would have been doing in your professional roles. Do you think we were prepared?
For Grenada, I would say the authorities, the disaster office, knew what was happening, and they were prepared because they had the structures in place. Okay, the structures were in place for managing the hazard, managing the outcome, managing what happened after. But the people,
Right.
and because we did not know what to expect, we had not had that
Right.
for almost 50 years. Okay, so I would say the people themselves were not fully prepared. They were always thinking, well, that's just a hurricane watch or hurricane warning. That would go north or it would just
Right.
dissipate, something like that. So the people themselves were not adequately prepared, I would say, based on how things.
So there was
played
this
out.
knowledge deficit which led to, in a sense, a lack of preparation is what you are saying.
Yes.
Because they had not experienced anything.
They had not experienced.
Dr. Carby, same case for Jamaica?
Well, that was
If you could,
that was the case for Jamaica, for Gilbert.
for Gilbert.
We hadn't had a hurricane since 1951.
Right.
So the population, I mean, I remember I had just started out in disaster management then. The night before, the Sunday night, I'm heading home now just to get a change of clothes or whatever to head back to the office. And there was actually a party going on in Halfway Tree. As, you know,
Okay.
loud music and dancing. The night before it was supposed to... No, I did not join them, no. Yes. But for Ivan now, not only had we had Gilbert, but we had had the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction between 1990 and 1999. So we had spent a lot of time on preparedness and mitigation, what we then called mitigation, risk reduction, really. So the population was in a much better place in terms of preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time they realized that even if God was a Jamaican, we could still get hit, you know? So the level of preparedness was much, much better. But there's one thing I'd like to mention here, that
Right.
Gilbert also gave rise to something which the sociologists call false experience.
Tell us
So-
about that.
Right. One of the things we found was that when we tried to get people to evacuate for Ivan, they said, but we went through Gilbert and nothing happened, you know? But actually the path of Ivan eventually was different. So some of the communities which were not badly impacted by Gilbert would now be impacted by Ivan. But they were referring to their Gilbert experience to justify their, you know, the lack of action. So that is something that one has to be aware of in disaster management practice.
Okay. We have heard about the people. Dr. Davis, you were in government at the time. I don't know if I can ask you, in terms of the preparedness you think, having received all the appropriate warnings from ODPEM, and would you say that as a, you know, all the institutions of government were prepared for Ivan at the time?
Well, given the technical capabilities we had, but insofar as you can...
As you could.
But I do not know whether... I have never looked at the actual data, but whilst there has been constant reference to like a hit in terms of a hurricane, that's all we
Right.
think. But what we discovered, certainly with Grenada, and then when we looked at the data for Jamaica, that the continuous rainfall had created as much damage as the hits as such. And so you had the recovery in terms of the infrastructure can be much more costly with the continuous rainfall, and not just in repairing, but also in getting economic activity up and about again. So that was a major, which, except for drain cleaning and so, I do not know what you can do.
How much more you thought that could have been done at the time?
Or even now, I mean, what you can do to prevent that impact as such. But that was one big difference to me in the realization that you don't have to get the big hit of whatever it is, 100 and whatever miles,
Right.
for the damage to be severe. For example, Archbishop, the UWI campus was much more severely damaged by Gilbert than by Ivan. I know because in terms of the recovery and rebuilding. The cost was much more severe for Gilbert than in terms of Ivan.
And isn't that, I mean, Dr. Carby and Dr. Walters, one of the challenges about dealing with disasters, even if you have the institutional memory or the memory of the last one, as in the case of Jamaica, no two disasters are the same. And so you could even have a lesser category hurricane and it does way more damage, you know, and it's the path that it takes, or, you know.
So
sure.
That's why I made the point about the continuous rainfall.
Right.
When it sort of weakens, retaining walls, etc. I mean, that can have the impact. It's not the force of the wind which is
right,
but rather the consequential damage.
So some are the intense rainfall, the duration of the rainfall. In other cases, it's the wind damage.
Yes.
I don't want to leave the experience of. Sorry, you wanted to say something, Dr. Carby?
I was just going to say that in terms of loss of life, it's far greater for water than for wind. You know, for storms. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Storm surge and overland flooding, riverine flooding.
And I think particularly in Ivan's case, that might have been.
Yes. Certainly for Jamaica, the storm surge, I don't know if you recall, many people lost their lives in Portland Cottage.
Right.
Because they had not evacuated.
Right.
And the storm surge came through. Yes.
Right. Before I leave, you know, talking about, stay with me on the Ivan experience. So you are a minister of government. You are directing disaster emergency. You were not the director at the time.
No, I wasn't.
No, you look too young to have been in any way. Dr. Carby.
Yes.
Dr. Carby looks like she should still be heading.
I'll carry the age and the wisdom.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Davies, for saving me there. Wonderful. Wonderfully. But you are in the agency, or you are in government, and we are going through this now. You know, give us a little bit of an idea. So you told us you're not even at home for 3 days. Tell us a little bit about that experience leading the agency, or as in your case, Dr. Davis, I'm sure you would have been with the ministers, you know, huddled and as we looked on this. Tell us a little bit about that experience, the during and just after.
Yeah, well, of course, as the head of the agency, you feel you carry the nation on your shoulders.
Right.
Because you have responsibility for ensuring that all these people are safe, basically. So you try to do your best, but it's sort of, once you realize that Met Office, Evan, says...
We have Mr. Evan.
Yes.
From the Met Office.
Met Office says, you know, it's pretty sure we're going to get impacted. At one point, it was supposed to be a direct hit. Now, one of the differences between Gilbert and Ivan was that for Gilbert, we did not have access to the satellite imagery, whereas for Ivan, we did. So I remember a couple of days out, I go home late, of course, trying to get some sleep. I wake up at 3 in the morning, and I say to myself, let me just check on what this hurricane is doing, so to see it hasn't, you know, pulled any surprises. Well, when I pulled up the imagery, there was this humongous sphere heading straight for Jamaica. And it was now a category 4 with nothing between Jamaica and it but warm water.
What do you do then? You are the face of disaster risk management. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, you know, especially for the young ones in the room, Dr. Carby was the face of disaster. Don't you agree with me, those who are here? This was the face, you know, which is why I'd ask you to give her the round of applause. Yeah. But what do you do at that time? How do you now mobilize a whole country and get them to take it, you know?
Well, at the time, my thought was, gosh, I will take any other job right now. I would even take the job of the Minister of Finance. You know?
Oh, wow. He will tell you soon that he would have exchanged.
Yes, but when I think of Ivan, there's one word that comes to my mind. It's teamwork.
Teamwork.
We had a lot of support right across the country. We had built a network. The director of the Met Office was embedded in the office with us.
Okay.
When we activated the National Emergency Operations Center, everybody turned up. That was supposed to be there. The parish disaster committees came up. The community teams came up. They were ready. The private sector. I'm sitting in my office. There's a knock on my door. A staff member from JPS, that's the electrical utility company, walks in. Dr. Carby, my director is giving you this sat phone in case you need it.
Tell us what a sat phone is.
Satellite, a satellite
Okay, thank you.
for the hurricane, because then it was supposed to be a direct hitter. The faith-based community, the service clubs, you know, really everybody was very, very supportive and tried to do their best to help us with the preparedness before.
Okay.
During you can't do much, but I will give you another story. Oh, well, I'm beginning to sound like one of these old and wise people. So people will not evacuate, right? So in the middle of Ivan, we get a call. This pregnant lady is about to go into labor. So we say to the family, try to get her to a neighbor because she was close to the sea. So they moved her inland to the neighbor. And the Ministry of Health doctor in the National Emergency Operations Center talked to them through the delivery of that baby in the neighbor's house, which I thought was a marvelous story. And the child survived and did well. And was called Ivan. Yes. Yes. So there's not much you can do. You can't mobilize rescue.
Right.
Once tropical storm will start. So it's a matter of sitting tight. And then afterwards, you try to get information. It's critical now, information. What has happened? How can we get help to people? Your priority, of course, is saving lives.
Mm-hmm.
So you try to rescue whoever you can rescue, and then relieving suffering, medical attention, and so on. So this is where your preparedness now is so important.
Right, and it sounds like you had the collaboration because of all the various groups.
Yes.
And we heard some of the people who stayed with you for the couple of days in the room.
Yes.
Dr. Walters, you wanted to add something?
But just to strengthen that, the teamwork, the collaboration,
right,
having all the entities, all the stakeholders involved, having them there, providing support, providing services, that is very important whenever you have to activate your emergency operations.
So we're learning an important lesson about resilience. Part of resilience is the teamwork, is the collaboration, is having the stakeholders in the room.
And in addition, your volunteers at the district and community level, those volunteers are key. The people at the shelters, the people at the district emergency operations centers, those are key people to provide the information that you need and provide the support at the community level.
At the community level.
That's right.
All right.
Speaking of the community level, just one interjection here. I think part of the mobilizing of the population were two events that we had, which made people realize that they could actually take part in preparedness. One was the evacuation of Portmore. We had a simulation exercise for the evacuation of Portmore.
You simulated evacuating Portmore.
We simulated full evacuation of the full plan for the evacuation of Portmore. So we had like 500 volunteers from the Portmore communities who came out.
Wow.
And the other thing was not hurricanes, but earthquakes.
Right.
We had an earthquake drill for New Kingston, the financial district, which was excellently supported by the business community of New Kingston. So we had built networks and relationships, which then proved to be important for the hurricane.
For the hurricane. Yes. Dr. Davis, let me ask you about the immediate aftermath rather than. So you are the Minister of Finance. Mm-hmm. And the next...
Everybody needs more.
But in the immediate aftermath,
yes,
you know, the reports are coming in about, you know, and we're beginning to see, you know, the extent of the damage. Really and truly, you are faced with this. What did you do at that point?
We focused on those almost whatever came out in which communities needed food and...
Okay.
And then there are lots of, well, probably natural, I don't know his experience yet. But
don't worry, we will ask him when he reaches.
The request for food would be enough to feed a large nation, and so there are those requests. Then there are other issues related to getting permission to proceed with road clearance, etc., without going the whole contractor basis. You can't, if places are cut off, you can't say, well, when the committee meets next week.
Right.
So somebody has to say, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So kind of taking the leadership as well, especially at critical points and making
you have to.
hard decisions.
The leadership is not saying yes. The leadership is saying no.
Okay.
Because everything is a major crisis which has to be attended to.
Right.
One of the things when I recorded, not for publication, there are some people who remain absolutely cool. So I don't know whether they're just
remember, we are broadcasting to the entire.
That's why.
So if there's anything you want,
watch my phrasing. Okay. I don't know whether it's that they're calm under pressure, or they just didn't understand the full extent of the problem. And then there are others who are jittery, etc. But after a time, then you knew which ones to take more seriously.
Okay. Let me stay with you just a little bit. So we heard how important, for example, social organizations were, especially during, and I imagine especially in the post period as well, for taking care and the recovery. In this room are also what I would call the development partners. Can I ask you if there was a role and an importance for the development partners? We didn't have CRIF yet, but I'm going to ask you a question about that.
Well, that's one I'm going to be very careful about.
Okay.
Because somehow many of the development partners have taken onto themselves the title of donors. It's a title I would question in sort of. It's makes sense to stay on the right side, but there's not necessarily any clear benefit. A lot of people just chat. Very few. If you look at those who made substantive contribution, I can name them, but I won't. Okay. Yes, but so that's something which I think is very, very important. Having just established JCIF, I don't know whether Omar is here. Yeah, JCIF, it allowed us, because here is this certified institution through which funds could flow to assist, and that helped. But the contribution from the quote donor community end quote was of varying value.
And I think what you're to speak to a little bit there then is the value of also developing your own internal resources. For one, you speak about JCIP, but also the CRIF came out almost, and I was going to tell you on my note, they say that I must describe you as one of the fathers, grandfathers, forefathers. I'm sorry.
I've reached grandfather, but I didn't know I'd reached forefather.
Of CRIF, yes, you know, and the value of having that kind of facility.
Well, it is one of these coincidences. Although Jamaica had been affected, is that the correct phrasing?
Or impacted.
Impacted. Yeah, I hate impacted as a verb. Any English teacher here? Right.
All right, we won't go down that road. But yes,
although Jamaica, when I saw the information and data on Grenada and on Haiti, and Archbishop, you have to tell me why Haiti is so bad luck, or whatever it is. But when I saw that information, I realized, yes, we have been hurt, but Grenada and Haiti and others. And when it was Jamaica's turn to speak on behalf of the Commonwealth Caribbean finance ministers.
Right.
Each year they pick one person. And coincidentally, it was mine. And one of the strange things, I don't know whether Mrs. Emmanuel has looked at, she sent me all this stuff. I could go on for 5 hours here, ma'am. But my speech was about Grenada.
Grenada.
And one of the reasons is that what the donor community was offering was more loans. And I said, I don't know if the tax office open. And so your contribution to them is to lend them more money. They're having difficulty repaying. And so I'm not suggesting that it was my idea that is because CRIF would be established. But I told them that that won't do.
Right. I laid the seed that there had to be something, a different approach
when I
to
was
doing
warned
this.
that I probably had overstepped my duties to speak on behalf of the Caribbean. And before we close, I have something else which I'm going to direct to the room, but more so to Minister Clark, as to what we need to take. I don't think we should reach the point of being satisfied with where we are. There are some other things which need to be done immediately.
We're at that point, but just before I ask you to tell me then, where do we go? You know, what are the lessons that we take from Ivan? Because we want to wrap up this panel. I do want to ask Dr. Walters, the point we're making about having capacity within, whether it is human capacity, volunteers, having, the ministries, was this also very true, or is it true for Grenada? No, is that a key component of disaster, surviving disasters?
Yeah, very true. Having capacity at the national level, at the district community level, and so we need to continue to build capacity, to train our people, and to ensure that we have people who can respond. But being small countries, so for Grenada is a very small country,
right?
You may not have all the capacity that's needed at the time. So you must depend on outside sources. So we have CDMA and we have other partners, regional, international partners, who will and can provide assistance after an event. So yes, it is important to have your capacity, but given the
and
size,
the internal capacity I'm talking about don't only reside within country, but within region as well. And we're going to hear about some of this, the value of this kind of capacity in the next panel, which is coming up in a minute. I do want to invite, if there's anybody who, from what we have said, a thought, an experience, something related to Ivan has come to you, we do have the open chair. And I'm going to invite you to come. Don't be afraid to make your way to the open chair as I ask my panelists to kind of give me their final thoughts. What do we take away from Ivan? Or have you seen anything that is a major lesson we have learned, a change in policy, a different way that we have done things? What do we take away? And I'm looking for that person to come at the same time to take my empty chair. That's okay.
Prof. Taylor, this is a point I made. I just realized it's 20 years ago, and I'm going to make it. The disasters which we are trying to ameliorate, the impact continue. And as we have become more aware of climate change, I raised then, and I was told that it was bigger decisions. Why doesn't CRIF have Cuba as a member state? They suffer the same thing because of as we do. But more important, they have lots to contribute because their disaster response mechanism is far advanced. Yes. And so it's an issue. I partially know the answer, but it's something which Nigel has to take on forward. Why would... no, it has to be. It cannot be that a member of a region, for some interesting but to me irrelevant reason is not regarded as part of the
So let me take your summation to say CRIF has established its value,
Yes.
its immense value, and the opportunities to expand, to include others,
Yes.
should be pursued wholeheartedly.
Yeah, but I'm making a further
And in particular,
Yeah, Cuba.
Cuba.
But I'm making a further point. It's not simply so that Cuba can benefit
Right.
from some more
But
load.
the mutual benefit. The mutual benefits. Dr. Carby, any final words? I see Liz coming to take the empty chair.
Yes, something we haven't mentioned, which is very, very important, and at the time of Ivan, we had just started doing, that was documenting quantitatively the impact of the event. So at the time, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, I'm not sure if PIOJ is here, they actually
He says, look to your left.
I think he's another forefather.
Right,
Yes.
but definitely.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica produced the socio-economic report on
Right.
Ivan, which looked at the entire range of impact, environmental, social, housing, education, all the sectors. And that has since evolved into the post-disaster needs assessment methodology, which is very, very important so that people like Dr. Clark can have accurate and objective information on what has happened and the cost of the damage.
So especially
that
the
was
value
important.
now of documenting data, doing the analysis,
Yeah.
putting it down so that years later as well we benefit from having done that. Dr. Walters, your last word?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Kabi here, right? Just wanted to agree with her. But Grenada, so we had Hurricane Ivan in 2004, and in 2005, we were impacted by Hurricane Emily.
Immediately after.
Right, 10 months after. So it can happen, right? Our population has to understand that it can happen. So what we need is that whole of country, whole of community approach. Okay, after Ivan, we recognize that we need that whole of country approach, policy, legislation, strong institution. We need to strengthen the institution, and we need to work with all people across the country to reduce vulnerability and risk. So everyone has to be involved in the process.
Thank you. A beautiful way to segue to our next panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please offer thanks to this panel.
Thank you to our first panel. And we immediately, let's just give them another round of applause, please. And we immediately go into our second set of panelists, second rotation, which will focus on the current Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management thrust and the proposed individual and collective approaches needed to advance the goal of a resilient, sustainable, and prosperous Caribbean. We're asking the following panelists to come forward. Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Jamaica. Mr. Isaac Anthony, CEO. Miss Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. Mr. Stephen Lawrence, Country Representative, Haiti, Caribbean Development Bank. Right, and we also have the open chair. Can you please utilize it this time? Proceed.
I was going to say you may have to physically grab someone.
Okay, I will this round.
Okay, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being willing to be on this panel. In fact, you have heard your names called several times in the previous panel. And, you know, And this is because, as I said, the kind of contribution that we know your organization and you yourselves are making. I actually want to start with a very similar kind of question as I started with the last one, because I do believe disasters are personal as well. What has happened since Ivan 20? And I'm a climate scientist, and from the climate scientist perspective, Ivan almost ushered in the beginning of a new climate era. And if you begin to look on the number of things, you know, and we can call what's in your memory. It's Dean, it's Irma, it's Maria, it's Jose, it's Dorian, you know, and then we had something like the 2013 to 2016 drought across the entire region. And you can begin to name these disasters. Having gone through that period where, you know, you had kind of a lull, we have almost gone into a new dimension of climate hazard or other kinds of hazards. Let me start by asking you the personal experience. Is there any one of those that you personally would say resonates with you personally because you have a personal experience? And then we'll explore the role of your institutions. Any of those? Thank you very much, Liz.
Good evening, and it's really great to be back here at my alma mater. I need to mention that.
I think we need to applaud.
Geography department.
All right, great.
So yes, I have a kind of amusing personal story. So I was actually very new to Sedima. I'd been there just for 3 years when Ivan happened, and I was actually pregnant with my first child. And when Ivan happened, as you can well imagine, we had a very small staff. Everyone jumped on board. As Dr. Walters was talking about, all the teamwork was there. We were working 18 to 20-hour days, making sure what needed to be done for Jamaica, Grenada was done. And my baby was due on November the 6th, which was my dad's birthday. He's passed now. And the work we had to do, she ended up being delivered 3 weeks early. My father never forgave me.
Oh, wow. Gentlemen, any disaster scenes that have resonated with you?
Yes, not Ivan particularly. I remember Ivan.
Okay.
But I have worked with the bank in Haiti.
Okay.
For maybe the past 12, 15 years. And I recall Matthew did quite some devastation in the southern section of Haiti.
Right.
And it's so interesting that Dr. Davis spoke about the frequency of these events in Haiti, etc. And to tie everything together, CDB had in 2010 started assisting the government of Haiti in actually paying the premium to CRIF. Right? And that year they were covered, and parametric, targets were met, and there was a payout of 23 million.
Okay.
And the Haitians, really appreciated it. Subsequent to that, we've had the earthquake, 21, I think. Payout was 40 million.
Right.
We're showing how in Haiti, and I represent CDB, but having an association with Haiti, I'd like to represent them as well.
Right.
They really appreciate the fact that an organization like CRIP exists. And even although they have difficulty in paying the premium, they approach other partners. And
there are other partners that are available to step in.
Pitch in and assist them, and they're very grateful.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe I could, I've actually had quite a peculiar experience with hurricanes and so on. I remember it was in 1994. We had, I think it was Tropical Storm Debbie. Debbie, and that's in St. Lucia now, brought in a lot of rain. I mean, you had the whole valley, a place called Cul-de-sac, was completely flooded. But guess what? I was out of St. Lucia. I just heard about it. So I missed that experience. And then we had, in 2013, I think I'd just become the CEO of CRIF. That very same year, we had what St. Lucians refer to as the Christmas rains.
Yes,
Everybody preparing for Christmas. Yes. On Christmas Eve, a major rainfall event. Guess what? I was out of St. Lucia. And then we had one of the more recent hurricanes to have affected St. Lucia, Hurricane Thomas. At the time, I was the Permanent Secretary of Finance.
Okay.
And guess what? I was out of St. Lucia.
You know, the institutions are going to ban you from leaving.
I was attending a special meeting of the Board of Governors of CDB. There was an election of a new president. And it was only, the interesting thing is that I was just out for just a day. I had myself and the then Minister of Finance, Prime Minister, we had to be, I think it was the regional force that flew us to St. Lucia because there were no flights going to St. Lucia. But the one time when I was in St. Lucia was for this hurricane called Hurricane Allen in 1980. And guess what? The hurricane impacted St. Lucia severely, but I slept through it. All I remembered seeing was my stepmother. I saw a floating light in my room.
A floating light?
A floating light. I suppose she was going around to check all the windows and the doors. It was a newly built house.
Okay.
So I did not experience anything. When I woke up in the morning, I was just in total shock when I looked around and saw all those roofs in other houses disappeared. So I've had that kind of experience.
You know, you have to tell the St. Lucia Disaster Management Agency anytime you are going on a plane out of the country. Minister Clark, a personal experience, any?
I'll give you two, but very briefly. Hurricane Gilbert, I was a student at Monroe boarding school, and you're always looking for excuses to go home early.
Okay.
And Hurricane Gilbert provided that, and that was a lot of excitement and fun. And I'll never forget the wonder of seeing roofs in the backyard and coming out during the still of the eye, and knowing that you have a certain amount of time, and the eye being perfectly calm, and then going back inside for the other half. It just, the word act of God, or the phrase act of God, took on new meaning. But the most sort of impactful professionally for me would have been in 2016 when I was appointed Ambassador of Economic Affairs. Jamaica was in the final year of the extended fund facility with the IMF, and unknown to anybody, we were negotiating, and I led those negotiations, a premature termination of the EFF.
Yes, tell us what
enter into
what's the EFF?
New extended fund facility.
Okay.
A premature termination of the extended fund facility to enter into the new precautionary standby arrangement. And it was, nobody knew about it. And it was supposed to, well, it was a surprise announcement. The fund team came to Jamaica for the announcement, and we were just waiting on the person who was head of the Western Hemisphere to arrive. Lo and behold, this Hurricane Matthew begins to gather momentum.
Okay.
And it looks as if it's headed directly for Jamaica.
Yes, it had that path initially.
And I recall on a Saturday going and meeting with the IMF representatives who were here, and working out on the back of an envelope what would have to happen if this thing was going to hit us. And those who can recall Hurricane Matthew, or if you want to refresh yourselves, it was the closest to a direct hit that we have had, i.e. we were certain it was coming. Mm-hmm. Everybody was absolutely certain, up to a few days before. So needless to say, the announcement was cancelled. The IMF team left Jamaica. It shows you, right? They didn't have any choice. Headquarters said, you have to come back. And it became very, I said to look, if I have a, dear God, if you ever give me the opportunity, I will never leave Jamaica as exposed as we are today. The hurricane, just look at the path, anybody, just to refresh yourself, miraculously, at the very last minute, there's no hurricane trajectory like this. There's none. At the very last minute, if Jamaica is here, the hurricane did that, and a right angle turn.
Right.
Okay, right angle. Passed over Haiti. Hundreds of people died in Haiti. If I'm not mistaken, the number is like 800 persons died in Haiti. And this is the hurricane, you'll recall, that went up the eastern seaboard of the United States and reduced New Jersey to a developing country. Do you recall that? So Jamaica was here, it did a right angle. We've never seen that before. Right angle and went all the way up. Completely missed. And I took that as my cue that what we're going to do is to make sure we build a fiscal resilience that can provide us with a little protection or provide the emergency resources that can help in the response to a natural disaster.
You know, Minister Clark.
My campaign, you're correct about personal. My campaign about building a multi-layered suite of instruments was born of that experience.
You know, Minister Clark, I'm not surprised that your personal experience dovetailed into the financial realm. But it is a good personal experience to say, you know, you take what happens personally and it motivates and gives you a broader perspective, which is a good way to ask you my second question then. It's not only that the whole hazard landscape has changed. I want to believe that how we approach the management of disasters has also changed in the 20 years since Ivan. And I see you nodding your head, so I think you're agreeing with me. What are the kind of ways, and you could speak directly to your organization if you want, or you could speak in a more broader sense, that you have seen changes since Ivan that have been beneficial? You know, how has the landscape changed, and especially for the good of the region? I don't know who wants to start first.
I'll go.
All right.
Dr. Davies sort of presented, in his presentation, sort of put forward the reasons why things had to change.
Okay.
He explained his experience of Ivan. I mean, a couple of points he made. One, that you don't have the time for committees to be making decisions. Right? You need to have ready resources. Two, you're not in a loan-worthy position, or that's the last time that you want to be going out and trying to have loans underwritten. And thirdly, that's not when you want to be going out cap in hand asking for donations. Okay? So, you know, each generation builds on the work of the previous.
The previous, right.
And, you know, what has changed, certainly as far as Jamaica is concerned, is that the approach is no longer an ex-post approach where you wait on the disaster and then you cobble together the resources that you need. The approach today, decidedly, is one where we have layers of financial instruments, multiple financial instruments, which I can go through in detail.
We won't go through all of them in detail.
We can't go through all of them.
For this, the panel is too short, but I understand the approach of having layers.
I'm going to use every opportunity I have to just talk about one and then another. But we have a multi-layered suite of financial instruments designed to deliver fiscal resources for the emergency costs. And just yesterday in Parliament, we passed the law that brings into effect the National Natural Disaster Fund. which is a fund to which the government will be mandated to save each year. In the first year, up to $1 billion. So not $1 billion, but up to $1 billion. In the second year and thereafter, at least $400 million a year, to get to $10 billion at some point. And this is to complement the other instruments that we have. We have the a credit contingent claim with the IDB in an amount of about 40 billion Jamaican dollars. We have our parametric risk insurance with CRIF, and Jamaica became the first small country in the world to independently sponsor a catastrophe bond that could deliver $25 billion in the event of a serious Category 5 storm. So financially, at least, what has changed is that we are putting the resources together before the event, so that resources are available. We don't have to scramble cap in hand. We'll always appreciate donations, but we don't have to scramble and be totally and wholly dependent on the generosity of others.
And that's a significant change in the landscape, especially based on what we had heard before.
Correct.
You know, you said, okay.
Yeah, but just to, to add to Minister Clark, I mean, I totally agree. I think Hurricane Ivan really ushered in a new era.
A new era.
In terms of how countries, how governments manage disaster risk and disaster risk financing. Prior to Ivan, although we had big hurricane events such as Gilbert and so on, but I think the difference between other hurricanes and Ivan is that Ivan impacted on multiple countries.
Right.
And when you look at the totality of the loss, it was staggering. You know, it was shocking to people, and that's what galvanized, I think, the authorities into action. But before that, it was, as Minister was saying, people would go all in hand begging for financial resources. If a country is affected, there would be a conference, a donor conference, to see how we could mobilize additional financial resources. In fact, I do remember being in the Ministry of Finance for Ivan, and the government of St. Lucia, along with 2 or 3 other countries, had come together to negotiate a loan for disaster risk financing.
Right.
But it was a loan. But the truth is, while we were prepared to go forward, there wasn't a lot of traction. So that died a natural death. But it was when Ivan impacted the region that it galvanized that action that brought this, the countries together to assist, to enlist the assistance of the World Bank to establish some form of disaster risk financing facility. So I really I saw Ivan as that catalyst, that really brought about the sort of change that Minister Clark has spoken about.
Right. So Minister Clark has told us about some of the kind of new innovative financing ways for pre-disaster, let's call it that, before the disaster. Let me stay with you for a little bit. I know CRIF has actually introduced a series of other kinds of ways that countries can benefit. It's not just the big hurricane. It's not the only kind of. Would you speak to a couple of them? And I'm coming to you, colleagues. Don't worry. About the changes.
Well, when CRIF was established in 2007, we started off with tropical cyclone coverage.
Right.
And we also had earthquake. And remember, earthquake is still significant.
Absolutely.
And you'd recall Haiti got a big payout in 2021, $40 million within 14 days. And 14 million US. And the truth is, when you look at the region as a whole, we saw another weather phenomena that are called rainfall. Rainfall associated with tropical cyclone, but rainfall not necessarily
outside of a tropical.
And we saw evidence of that in Jamaica. And again, we saw what happened in 2020. You had those 3 rainfall events. Right. While on their own, they were not necessarily considered to be significant. But again, when you look at the totality of the loss, it was significant. So CRIF, again, using parametric insurance, was able to make available to the countries a product for excess rainfall. But the other thing that we have done, which we are particularly proud of, is the fact that we have developed our own models These are not models that we rely on third-party providers. We were able to do this, and we owned it. We owned the intellectual property. So we now have the flexibility to develop additional products. And leveraging that, we developed one for the fishery sector. So now we're not just looking at just the sovereign level, but we are looking to see how we can provide protection to the vulnerable in our communities, such as the fisher folk. So I'm pleased to say that we've made some progress in that area, and we are looking to do more.
Right. And you're speaking to something, that when we begin to look for solutions, we often, especially in the science world, talk about they have to be contextual. They really have to match our context. So, for example, you develop something for the fisheries, but even your models have to have the thresholds for trigger that are related to our context.
Absolutely.
And then, we ended the last panel talking about the value then of collecting data so that we have the data to inform the models so that the thresholds are right, so that the payouts are appropriate when those thresholds are crossed. Good. Great to hear about these additional innovations. Let me go to, you are in the business, Liz, of making sure when that disaster strikes. Well, I've prepared this before as well. You are on spot. What has changed over those 20 years?
Oh, Michael, this is such a heavy question. I could talk all afternoon, but I'll stick to 4.
Oh, thank you.
I'll stick to 4 points. I would say, just picking up on what Isaac indicated about, Ivan really being a watershed.
Right.
So I'll start on the preparedness, more on the response side with the regional response mechanism. Because the scenario planning that had been done with this is our regional arrangements with horizontal cooperation, working with partners, etc., to respond to countries that need assistance. We'd always premise these scenarios on one territory being impacted. That was it. That was before 2004. It opened our eyes to the realities of what could take place. So we actually revisited so many elements of that regional response mechanism. We've deepened capacity through working with the regional security system to have on standby. Now we have 2 CARICOM disaster relief unit teams. We have more deployment personnel trained across the region. We built out greater partnerships with a number of international entities, NGOs, because we recognized we didn't have the resources within the region to address multiple impacts ourselves. The second area I would say is in terms of how we intentionally have worked now to leverage science and technology to inform the decision making. And Dr. Carby alluded to it in her comments when she said during Gilbert we didn't have satellite imagery, and that just resonated so much with me about how does one deal with the cyclonic activity without satellite imagery. I don't know. So we have a great relationship now that we've developed with the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, where they actually embed meteorologists with SEDIMA. So we're getting the science real time. They're doing the analysis. They've upgraded the quality of their models, the kind of granularity that we get, so we can tell a country on your west coast you can expect storm surge of 10 to 12 feet, and on the east coast you would expect it at 15 to 18. We can go to that level and also advise territories on where you want to think about evacuation. So we're using the science a lot more and in a very tangible way that impacts on people's lives. The third area I would say is related to sectoral resilience. Because what we recognize at SEDIMA is that if we wanted to really move the needle on resilience, we had to tackle resilience within the sectors, because this is where the losses are happening. And I know the Honorable Minister knows this much better than I. So we started a conversation immediately after Ivan, which in 2007 was consolidated into what we call the Comprehensive Disaster Management Coordination and Harmonization Council, and it survives up until today, where we brought sectors in, where we identified lead entities to drive that resilience conversation in the sectors, with SEDIMA being a supporting act. And we've seen so many changes at the sectoral level. We can go into meetings now with our sectors, and the ministers are speaking authoritatively on resilience issues for agriculture, tourism, and I think working on that since 2007, when it was formalized, has really made a difference. And the last area I'll touch on is actually related to safe building. Because when we saw the level of devastation of the housing stock in Grenada, it said to us, SEDIMA cannot not intervene here. And we started a conversation with the regional engineers. We looked at design-related matters, and at that time, we prepared a new standard for construction of residential homes, and I'm happy to say that this year we've now upgraded it to a design which can withstand Category 5 hurricane winds and Richter scale 7 earthquake impacts. And this is being launched very soon. We're going to be partnered with financing from the Caribbean Development Bank, thank you very much, along with the government of Norway. And this training is going to start in 7 of our states within the next month or so. And we've worked with the CANTA, which is the Regional Organization of Training Institutions, to integrate it as a part of the Caribbean Vocational Qualifications, the CVQ. So it is now being offered as a part of training for artisans. And I think this is going to be a game changer in the next 20 years to come.
Excellent. I think these are wonderful kinds of initiatives that we are hearing. And you can applaud, absolutely. You know, what is very clear is that post-Ivan, we had a different vision for how we needed to do things. And the vision, you know, I like what Mr. Clark said, it didn't depend on looking externally. You know, it began now, you know, what do we need to do within the region? Haven't left you out at all. You are the, you know, we have talked finance, but you are representing the bank itself, you know, the CDB. What changed post-Ivan? I know you gave us some idea already in talking that the CDB would come to the aid of some countries. But what else would you say? How has that landscape changed?
Well, you say bank, but we rather to look at it as development. Yeah?
Okay, the development bank, if you prefer.
It takes money to do it. But
yes.
But in effect, we're looking at resilience generally.
Right.
And there are many aspects of resilience, including environmental resilience. And the projects that we support, we are get engaged in. We insist on proper standards. We do ESI, environmental and social impact assessments.
Right.
We insist that the designs are done properly and the construction is done properly. Outside of the projects, you know, in the pre-planning and so we support country risk profiles, developmental sector policies jointly with and the disaster risk management tools, whether they be financial or otherwise. One thing of interest that to go back to CRIF and the suite of after disasters, sometimes our public utilities are greatly impacted.
Right.
And there is an initiative that we are deeply involved in, which looks at a separate insurance for the water sector, water utilities. That, and you know, we're looking at that with CRIF as well. So there are new things that we're exploring because of our experiences from previous events. And you know, as you know, the story is always lessons learned. You go forward.
And I like the idea that you are saying that it's not just now a matter of financing, giving out finance, but making sure that the projects that you finance are almost resilient from the beginning, as best as is possible. And I notice I've been joined by Dr. Archer. Well, she'll introduce herself in the chair. Just before I take her, though, well, let me ask you to introduce yourself and make a comment. Try.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Carol Archer, Professor of Urban Planning and Public Policy at the University of Technology, Jamaica, former Dean of the Faculty of the Built Environment. So I'm joining the conversation because I think it's the most appropriate time for me to enter the conversation as we talk about building resilience and the means that we've put in place. I hear them, and I'm very familiar. Of course, we have our building code. UTEC was at the forefront when we looked at reviewing, and even now, we are training persons to be ready to implement. But I am concerned because whereas we would put these measures in place to build resilience, I am concerned about the enforcement, and particularly as it relates to land use management, yes? So we know that, as most small island developing states, we are vulnerable, storm surge, sea level rise. Yet still, when you look at where we do development, they are in those most vulnerable areas. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be a disconnect at what happens at the regional level and even at the national level. And so my question to CDB and to CCRIF, how do we ensure that as a region, as we put these regional and perhaps even with the global protocols, that we have the response and we take those on board and we don't have the type of development that continues even with the data that shows if we continue.
So you're saying in spite of even building it into the, how do we ensure that it's enforced yes. at the local level? I don't know if anybody would like to take this on. Not a soul is looking.
I guess I should exit stage left.
No, thank you for being brave, Dr. Archer, to take the open chair.
I won't take it on, but because a curveball. But Dr. Carvey would know, we've been associated. In a former life, before I went to CTV, I was involved in some floodplain mapping.
Right.
And we have done floodplain maps in various areas throughout, which delineate areas with return periods and so on. And you can say, okay, maybe once in every 5 years, here's going to be flooded.
Right.
But still you have.
Having produced those maps, how do we then make sure
Absolutely.
That they are utilized?
And that's where I think we need to have a conversation with the parliamentarians about enforcement and but then there are other issues which they consider. So we are looking at it from a blinkered view, but at the same time there is enough data.
Right, and I think that's what we are hearing. There are data, there is data. There's never enough, because there's always some more that we need to produce, especially in some sensitive sectors. Sometimes we tend to, limit disasters to certain sectors.
For example, we can recall Caribbean Terrace, devastated by
in Jamaica,
Ivan. Yes, right. By Port Harborview. And I recall I was on the board of NEPA at the time, and one of the things that we recommend for that area is to, declare, because I remember distinctly, post-Ivan, UTEC organized a conference,
right.
Post-Ivan conference. And we, the then mayor, and Minister Davis, you were the keynote speaker at the conference, and there was the discussion about no-built areas.
Right.
So we took that on board, and it was stated that Caribbean Terrace would be no-built area. That was a recommendation that it was discussed at NEPA. I'm yet to see a formal declared statement that, given the impact of storm surge resulting from these incidents, that areas such as Portland Cottage, Rocky Point, and Caribbean Terrace would be no-built area.
Right. And I think there are several other examples that we could quote, you know, and I think the point that you're trying to make is studies have been done. We have the maps. It's how do we now move to the point? Liz, you wanted to make that, and I think it allows me to segue into a kind of, we're wrapping up, final question.
Yeah, I wanted to just add 2 points. Of course, I concur with my colleague from the CDB that there are these forces and elements that come into the actual decision, which may not necessarily be congruent with the advice given by the technical persons who take vulnerability related to hazards into consideration, I must indicate. All right, so but just to add 2 points, that there's also a social dimension to this.
Yes.
Because poverty is an underlying driver of risk. So there are those who may have the economic means to make a decision as to where they can live and can choose to live in a place which is safe. And then there are those who are not going to have those means, and there will be a requirement for the government to step in and address some of those things. And the point is on a more positive note, because it is about how are we preparing ourselves to take advantage of post-disaster situations to move the needle. And the legislation that is in place, certainly the model legislation that SEDIMA has prepared, does provide space for designation of the especially vulnerable areas or no-build areas, as Dr. Archer had indicated. And I think post-disaster is the opportunity to bring those matters onto the table. Because with the types of losses that governments will be looking at in those specific spaces, you have a pretty strong chance that you can influence relocation for some of those areas that are known.
So this allows me to segue then, as I say. So we see that there has been improvement post-Ivan, 20 years, and you have laid out quite a number of areas. But clearly we are not there yet. We can't classify our Caribbean as resilient, 100% resilient. Where do we need to go? What else would, not saying that you can necessarily, wave your magic wand and we have reached there, but where, as a region, as a country, as Jamaica, do we go from here in the pursuit of resilience? Sure, thank you, Minister.
Speaking for Jamaica, there's a lot more work to be done.
Okay.
Resilience is multifaceted.
Okay.
It takes into consideration aspects in the real physical environment and preparedness and mitigation. And it also takes financial resilience. Just speaking briefly about the two components, the point made by Professor Archer is quite appropriate. That resilience is going to require, or increase resilience, that in the private sector, private households, that they are not allowed to build in areas that are highly vulnerable to being impacted from natural disasters. On the government side, the government is going to need to continue on the approach that prioritizes resilient infrastructure.
Okay.
So if you talk about a wish list or where we want to go, we would love to be at a place where all electricity lines are underground.
Okay.
How resilient would that make us? But to put all electricity lines underground, it's tens of billions of dollars.
We'll allow Dr. Archer to take you on after the...
Yeah, you can take
because I know there are different views about that. But we get the point about resilient infrastructure, which is...
Resilient infrastructure, meaning, for example, an easier example is to say we need drains beneath the roads.
Yeah,
okay? Knowing the impact of rainfall, having experience of Ivan and the impact of rainfall there, we know that wind is one form of damage, but there's nothing more damaging, or few things more damaging than running water. And having the water flow in drains underneath the roads is paramount. But again, that is going to cost tens of billions of dollars.
And using your example, it's also drains that match the climate to come, not just the climate of the present.
And then once you have the drains, to make sure they're
clean.
Clear and they're clean. So a lot of work to do on the mitigation front. On the financial front, while we continue to build resources that the government has access to counter the fiscal impact of natural disaster, we also have to be concerned about the resources that households have access to in
Right.
the event of disaster. And
Speaks to the social
our
aspect
statistics
as well.
is that we are completely underinsured when it comes to peril insurance. The penetration of general insurance in Jamaica, if I can recall, it would be in the region of maybe 10 to 15%.
Right.
In terms of households, right? The number of households in Jamaica that have insurance for their house or home in the event of natural disaster.
Well, I mean,
that
so
is a huge exposure
will
that
have-
at some point we're going to have to cover.
You'll have to speak to the affordability of insurance, which also changes in a climate change
And
era.
question of-
And,
You know.
and as a result of that, we are working on legislation and have been working for some time to bring microinsurance, to
Okay.
make microinsurance a reality, with the aim of increasing the penetration of insurance, recognizing it's low for a reason, not because people don't have, right? It's low because people can't afford it. So the idea is to innovate as far as the regulations are concerned, to make the concept of microinsurance a possibility.
Right.
Yeah, and that, I think, is going to be a game changer once we're able to bring that to passage in Parliament.
Thanks, Minister Clark. We hear about, the resilient infrastructure. You even mentioned legislation as a tool, as well as dealing with the social capacity to deal with. Where do we go?
Yeah, well, I totally agree that there's a lot that has been done, certainly in recent times.
Right.
Certainly in the post-Ivan era. But there's still a lot more work to be done. And again, I've always said so, Jamaica has really done very well. I mean, when I consider the extent to which, certainly under the leadership, and not because he's sitting next to me, but I must commend him, Minister Clark, for the work he has been doing in helping to strengthen the financial resilience of the country by making sure that you cover the broad spectrum of disaster risk financing and ensuring that we come with the appropriate instruments. Barbados is also making progress as well, maybe taking a slightly different strategy as well. But you see that the countries are making progress. But as CRIF, I would say that we will do whatever we can to support our member countries. I think it has now been recognized that now CRIF is really a development. It's not a regular insurance company.
Right,
We are
right.
a development insurance company. And what do we really mean by that? And to explain it and to understand it, perhaps we could just draw the parallel with a Caribbean Development Bank, where in the case, on the one hand, we provide products, so development banks such as CDB, the World Bank, IDB, they do have financial products, loans, etc. But on the other hand, they do have programs that helps to support the socio-economic development of countries, of their members, and to help build resilience. And we're doing the same thing, but more on the insurance side. So we will continue to do that. We will certainly help to scale up by adding additional products. I mean, we've done so much. I mean, I have not even gone into details in terms of some of the things.
Unfortunately, we don't have the time
for that.
to us to go into those details. We're wrapping up now.
Much, but we will continue to help and so provide the support in terms of building the resilience of the countries, but particularly on the financial side.
Okay, right. Liz?
So 3 things for me. I think first we have to keep people at the center.
People at the heart of this.
This is what we're about. This is the work that we're doing. And how do you really inculcate that culture of safety? I think we need to leverage the voice of the youth a lot more because it's about transforming for the future. And personally, I'm trying to replace me and Dr. Walters. And yes, intentionally. So we've launched, for example, a young professionals program. We're working with CXC on the curriculum. These are intentional interventions for change. The second point I'd make is around recovery, because I think we have to do a lot more ex-ante planning for recovery in the region. SEDIMA is very committed to this. We've just integrated this as a new functional area at the agency. We were working with countries to look at recovery frameworks ahead of events taking place and really thinking through how you're going to approach that. And the third, I mean, it's linked to finance as well. Money is important, and an important piece of that is about how we're treating these artificially divided conversations on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction.
Yes.
And it started at the global level for political reasons, and it's permeated to the national level, and we've not been able to correct it. And I think this is something that we need to fix. When we're looking at flows, for example, that will come in under the loss and damage fund, you have to look at disaster risk reduction as your first point of intervention on climate change adaptation interventions, and I will continue to advocate for that. But at the same time, we have to look at national level capacities to be able to absorb and make good use of the resources as well. And that's a steeper climb because the human capacity is limited.
Thank you. All right. Almost at the last word. I'm keeping you on my panel, Doctor, just so don't worry. Mr. Lawrence, where do we go?
After Mr. Lawrence?
I think we should continue on
the path that we have started on.
Especially when it comes to partnerships.
Partnerships. So partnerships will become critical.
Data and so. Our current strategic plan looks at resilience in 5 different areas. You look at social, environmental, economic, financial, and institutional.
So broadening how we view resilience.
Right.
Okay.
And we believe that in addressing resilience in these 5 pillars, it will advance everything, whether social, economic, and the environmental benefits. So it's important that we redouble our efforts to work together to, find solutions, develop new instruments, look at unique situations, learn from other situations, etc.
I like the concept of partnership, especially that you have introduced. Dr. Archer, you were brave enough to step to the chair. I give you very short.
One of the things that we absolutely need to do as small island developing states is to reimagine our land use planning. And we have to start with our spatial plans.
Okay.
All of our towns and cities are coastal. Historically, they are designed that way. So we need now to spatially look at how we renew our urban centers, the existing ones, and where we need to reestablish other communities. Yes? And I think with the support of CDB, I know they've just, I don't think they have finalized their urban policy for the Caribbean. And perhaps this is something that CCRIF could look at as part of building the resilience. Let us look at how communities are developed. The whole question of land and access to land is what is contributing to the impact of incidents such as disaster. So spatial planning has to be one of the pillars that we take into consideration.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we could go on and on, but clearly we will not go on. Oh, he wants to ask a question? Please, come, yes. It's a good, we spoke about youth. Just tell us your name.
Hello. My name is Amir Francis. I'm a 10-year-old grade 6 student at the Avondale Preparatory School.
Welcome. And what is your question? I want you to say the youth are technologically adept. Right.
My question today is, how does the Ministry of Finance and SEDEMA prioritize support and allocate resources to countries and sections of countries that have been impacted by a natural disaster?
Wow. Okay, Minister of Finance and SEDEMA, you now have the last word. And this is the brief, understandable answer for...
Thank you for that question. In 20 years, you'll be sitting up here.
That's right, that's right.
For sure. In terms of the allocation of resources after an event has happened, Jamaica depends on the damage assessments that are done by entities such as the Office of Disaster Preparedness, NWA, JSIF, organizations that work in communities, the assessments of damages come back in. They eventually end up at the Ministry of Finance. And that's where you get the gray hairs begin to come. Dr. Davies can speak well to that. And in terms of the allocation, no, it's go after where needs it the most.
So need becomes...
Need is a big drive of allocation. Representation also matters.
Just explain what you mean.
What I mean is that, some are able to represent the need better than others. And that is a reality in human dynamics. And I wouldn't be frank if I didn't say that, right?
Right. Okay, and Sedima, how do we deal with the allocation of resources?
Yes, so SEDIMA's mandate is to support national governments.
Okay.
So very much in keeping with the Honourable Minister's intervention, we are guided by the priorities that have been identified at the national level. And I would also say that we also try to influence the thinking around how resources are allocated, and clearly persons who are previously identified as being in a vulnerable category are important, but we also have to bear in mind that post-events, you also get persons who were kind of living on that line, who slip below the line, the marginal ones. So you do have to expand your social protection systems to try to incorporate them in the loop as well, but predominantly guided by damage assessment processes at national.
So they take their cue largely from the countries themselves and also look on those who have greatest need as well. Thank you very much. Please. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we do have to end. I know we could continue, but please also give the panel a round of applause. These are dialogues that can continue, and I'm sure will continue even after we come down. Thank you.
I will ask the other panel to come on stage just for a photo, along with you guys. So if you can just stand forward, and I will also ask the chair of our Technical Assistance Committee at CRIF, Mariam Robinson, to present Mr. Francis. No. Where did he go? Where did you go? Omar? Yes. No. Oh, nice. What's his name? Amir. Can you come closer so that everyone can fit in the frame of the photos? Can we have the official photos of the panel? Go ahead. Official photo of the panel. And then official, right, so of the panel. And I think we can multitask. So whilst we're doing the photos of the panel, I will immediately transition downstairs to begin the time capsule event. And I will call on Mrs. Sandra Bailey, Deputy Chairperson of CRIF, to please proceed downstairs. We ask everyone to remain up here because you will see the time capsule event from here. It should take a few minutes, and we will be calling each person by group. So you would come down. Some persons, your time capsule item is downstairs already. Others you have with you. So it's very easy and simple. So please bear with us for 2 moments. Once again, thanks to our panel, and I will proceed downstairs. Can I start? Oh, so. Can I start? Can I start? Yeah, because it's a bit long. We are at the point of the time capsule event. To the left of me is the IVOD Plus 20 time capsule. It will include items. It has been designed to include items from government ministries, departments and agencies, development partners, private sector organizations, academia, youth and other individuals that paint a picture of the period before or during IVON, the present, and our hope for the future.
Some of the items that will be included today will describe visions of a resilient Jamaica and Caribbean. The time capsule will also hold prominent pieces of information, such as policy documents, speeches, and even sectoral debates, and also paint a picture of where we are today and how we got here. This time capsule will be stored in the 20 years in the UWI Museum. We intend to register the IVON Plus 20 time capsule with the International Time Capsule Society, which estimates there are between 10,000 and 15,000 time capsules worldwide. The time capsule will then be opened in 20 years in 2044, when these organizations, and maybe some of us or future leaders, will assemble again, open the time capsule, reminisce, and reflect on whether the visions contained herein have been advanced or achieved, or they may take time to immerse themselves in the rich history contained in the time capsule.
Okay, so we're now opening the time capsule. Many of you, right? So the time capsule is here. Many persons have been asked, to, as we said before, to place documents, or in some cases, persons have given us jump drives. Now, in 20 years' time, maybe jump drives will not exist. So I would actually be the first off to put some stuff into that time capsule.
Right. So Liz, so as Liz prepares her package, the first set of items to be included in the time capsule are a laptop. Why? Because in 20 years, jump drives, and there will be quite a few going in here, will most likely be entirely useless. This means that we have to put in an instrument that would allow us to be able to use these jump drives. Liz will also include many of the IVON Plus 20 documents, the IVON Plus 20 concept note, documents from the launch of the initiative, the IVON Plus video, the IVON Plus 20 poetry pieces, the agenda from today's event, among others. In 2044, her children, Lily Isabel Murray and Zachary Murray, will open this envelope.
We will now ask the following panelists, all panelists, to come forward to include their items in the time capsule. Starting with Isaac Anthony, Honorable Nigel Clark, Liz Riley, Stephen Lawrence, Dr. Omar Davies, Dr. Barbara Kabi. So in any order you wish. For example, Isaac, for example, will be including in the time capsule the young people's slang. This is where we started in 2007-8. This was the annual report. This was our last annual report. This is how we're doing, right? So Isaac, Honorable Minister Clark, Elizabeth Riley, Omar Davies, Dr. Davies.
Yes,
Your
Dr.
time
Davies.
capsule is here.
Yes, so Dr. Davis, please come forward. You may have gleaned was one of the architects behind the establishment of CRIF and the need for quick liquidity following a natural disaster. Among other documents and his own personal message, Dr. Davies is included in the time capsule his 2007-2008 sectoral debate, which speaks specifically to his role and that of the government of Jamaica in the establishment of CRIF.
Yes. You want to say who would open your time capsule in 2044? Maybe your grandson? You can put him on. We can also begin to call the teams from UWI, the University of the West Indies. Are you ready? Isaac Anthony will now place his documents in the time capsule, some of which are you can indicate, Mr. Anthony, who would open the documents in 2044, and it could either be the next CEO of CRIF or maybe his daughter, Aisha Anthony. You can put it on, because we would know where to, no, just at the front, just at the front.
You can just write it on the front.
Anyone else ready?
Yes, please come forward.
Elizabeth Riley. Elizabeth Riley. Would you like to say anything? Yes.
Sadima's placing in the time capsule some of the actual situation reports which came forward from the countries impacted by Hurricane Ivan, as well as photographs from the impact, and also have included a letter to the incoming Executive Director of SEDIMA, who will be there in 2044, with just some thoughts on what I hope will be a new, resilient environment that they're operating in when they are sitting in the seat. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Minister Clark getting closer. You're ready? Would you like to put on it who would open it in 2044? Or have you done that already?
Yes, this is you want to speak in the mic? This is for the Minister of Finance and Public Service to the Minister of Finance or the Financial Secretary, as the case may be, and it is a letter that speaks to the multi-layered suite of financial instruments that Jamaica is sort of pioneering in the region as a means to provide fiscal resources for an emergency, to finance the emergency needs that arise out of a natural disaster. And my letter to be opened in 20 years is to ask the administration of the, in 20 years' time, to ensure that this approach continues, and if anytime along the next 20 years we lose the energy for it, to ask them to restart it. Because only by ensuring that we provide the resources ex ante, provide the resources before, will we be able to navigate
Stephen Lawrence can come forward and put in the time capsule the contribution from the Caribbean Development Bank. If you would like to say anything, please do.
Thank you very much. This letter just has a look at some of the things we're doing presently. And it's written to our development partners with a wish for continued cooperation and some ideas about what we may be doing 20 years' time in the future collaboratively. So this is what it is.
Thank you so much. We now call on Dr. Barbara Carby and we call down at this time Madison Jones. Oh, she's here. Go ahead.
Okay. My item is a letter to the National Disaster Coordinator of Jamaica in 2044. Essentially, I'm asking that person whether in fact we have made any progress and how much progress has been made in becoming a more resilient nation. And it has some suggestions as to measures that could be used to determine that. Okay.
Thank you. I now, go ahead, please. I now call on Mrs. Sandra Bailey, our Deputy Chairperson, who will be accompanied by her granddaughter, Madison Jones. Sandra is including the children's booklet that CRIF has produced, Hazards, Disasters, and Climate. Her granddaughter will open the time capsule along with her sisters in 2044, whereby photographers. Oh, where did he go? Go ahead. Go ahead. And then your photo. Sandra is also putting in another envelope. Between 2020 and 2022, we were all faced by a global pandemic. Our members survived COVID. So the CRIF mask is included here. We now call on all the UE teams led by Mrs. PVC Maynard to include your contribution into the time capsule, followed by Professor Michael Taylor and his two daughters, Amanda and Melanie Taylor, who will open the time capsule in will open the contribution in 2044. Go ahead, Sandra.
I don't know if I might.
Yes.
All right. This is, we're hoping that we can take, in the envelope are some publications in relation to lessons that we've learned as a result of Ivan and other disasters, but also contained in here is a letter to the Vice-Chancellor in 2044, just advising of the hope that many of our centres that we've started will be continued, and to look at how the region, and hope that the region will be pulling together to deal with these particular disasters and resilience. Thank you.
Professor Taylor. Professor Taylor is accompanied by his daughters Amanda and Melanie Taylor, who will open his speeches in 2044. Prof. Taylor has included here the two State of the Climate reports and a letter explaining why. The State of the Climate reports detail what Caribbean and Jamaican climate are today and what they are projected to be in 2050, which is close to 20 years from today when the capsule will be open. Our hope is that the climate will actually be better than projected. Professor Taylor.
Thank you.
Shireen James Williamson, accompanied by her son Adam Williamson, and Shireen is head of the Department of Geography and Geology, but Shireen, along with the UE Museum, Shani Roper, and were the sort of technocrats of this time capsule. So if you ever wondered what a curator of a museum, one of the things that they did was to just bring all of this alive. Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Shani. You can if you want.
So this is just a letter to my son and his generation for 20 years from now. It shows, it tells them about the challenges of our generation and their responsibility in ensuring that some of those challenges are alleviated.
We now call on Professor, the UWI Mona campus on behalf of the principal, so Dr. Clive Davis will be Major Clive Davis, will be including the time capsule piece.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm doing this on behalf of the Deputy Principal, UWI Mona, and this is a letter that is to be opened by the principal at that time. We've only recently rolled out a number of sustainable development plans, and we're hoping that by that time we would have actualized on many of them. So we now put this in. Thank you.
Just a general announcement. We do have cocktails after, so we're encouraging everyone. We know you're hungry. We have lots of cookies and cakes and food, so please stay with us. Bear with us for 10 more minutes, if so much. We now call on the representative from the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center. Is she here? I think she may be upstairs, so if you could please come down.
Move to the government.
And now we're going to our government. Oh, here you are.
Yes.
Good evening. I represent the Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience Crisis Management Center, Professor Lloyd Waller, and we are putting in his book on the future of tourism resilience, unraveling emerging trends and possibilities, written by Professor Lloyd Waller and Minister of Tourism Edmund Bartlett. And in 20 years, the then Executive Director will take it out of the capsule.
Thank you very much. We now call on our government representatives from the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, Mr. Omar Sweeney, to join us, as well as Mr. Evan Thompson from the Met Service, who will be including documents in the capsule. As Dr. Archer is down here already, we ask that you come forward for UTEC and include your time capsule.
Okay, so I include this, which is actually a CD from our conference. In 2005, UTEC, through the Faculty of the Built Environment, organized a post-Ivan conference looking at built environment issues in small island developing states and territories. And the conference proceedings are here with prescriptions as to how we deal with disaster risk management. So I put this in on behalf of the UTEC community and ask that it be opened by a UTEC student.
Thank you very much. We also call at this time on Archbishop Kenneth Richards to include his contribution as well. And at the same time, others such as Camille Beckford-Palmer from UNICEF and Shalini Jagnaran can also come down, as well as our cable and wireless, as well as our private sector representatives, cable and wireless, and CGM Gallagher, as well as Mr. Burke and Ms. Alexander is down here. Omar Sweeney. And Omar reminded me this week that he was the administrator of the fund that led to the grant that led to the establishment of CRIF. So I don't want to call you a forefather, but I want to say you're one of this. So let us give, thank you, Omar.
Thank you.
And if you want to say anything about your contribution.
Yes, we have here today for the time capsule a small commemorative book And I have a handwritten note to the then managing director in 2044, and a personal note to my son who will open the capsule. My only wish is that the then managing director and my son are not the same person.
Thank you, Omar. Mr. Evan Thompson, head of the Met Service Jamaica, and I'm sure I heard your voice during Ivan.
Yes, I actually was there. That's right. And I am here accompanied by my most recently recruited female meteorologist. She's with me. She is Miss Raquel Smith. And we are inserting this item, which is actually the images that were taken from the first Doppler radar that was erected in the English-speaking Caribbean right here in Jamaica. It is showing the images of Ivan's approach and passage to Jamaica. It also has a letter, of course, explaining some of that and indicating who should accompany the director, the youngest person in the staff of the meteorological organization.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Is it Archbishop?
Archbishop Ken?
Yes.
And we recognize the importance of prayer, and I think Archbishop Ken, on behalf of faith-based organizations of Jamaica, will place in this time capsule a prayer. Thank you, Archbishop.
So Father Brown is here.
Yes.
And he can open he might treat my successor.
Well, you can wait until he comes
Yes,
and
so
get
he
a
can
photo.
join you. Yes. Yes, great.
We now invite UNICEF Jamaica. One of the items that UNICEF Jamaica is including in the time capsule is something called the Climate Landscape Analysis of Jamaica, which is this document, and it's an assessment of the impact of climate, energy, and the environment on children in the Caribbean. An excellent publication.
And we are also including the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan for UNICEF as well.
Thank you. Shalini Jagnarine from iStruct-E, which is the Institution of Structural Engineers Caribbean Regional Group. Shalini, would you like?
Yes, the Institution of Structural Engineers Caribbean Regional Group. We have approximately 320 members across 13 countries. We belong to a wider organization that has about 30,000 members around the world. We have now adopted not just structural safety as being the highest importance to structural engineers, but also sustainability to be on par with life safety. So we hope that this letter is addressed to the future chair of the Caribbean Regional Group. So we hope that in 20 years we've made significant changes, not just in terms of life safety in this region being a multi-hazard zone, but also in terms of making significant changes towards reducing the impacts of climate change and mitigation efforts.
I would just like to make an announcement. Shalini, they're calling you. For our waiters, we have a lot of people here. Can you begin to serve some drinks for us, please? Our waiters, can you go ahead and serve drinks whilst we're finishing up this exercise? Thank you. Justine, can you please ask them? Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll now invite Mr. Michael Brown, and he's Director Technology Operations Flow C&W, and he will be followed by Matthew Pragnell, board member of the Gallagher Group. Mr. Brown, you could just share what you're putting in the time capsule.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm placing a letter to the future Vice President and General Manager of Flow, explaining what we did during Ivan and up to this point in time to improve the resilience of the network and the improvements that we'll continue to implement to ensure that we can properly serve our customers in the event of a hurricane, tropical storm, or any natural disaster.
Thank you so much. I believe you have other things as well.
Definitely.
And I think your colleague, Ms. Deline Powell, will join you as well. Is she joining? Yes. But
Yes.
please go ahead and share the rest of the package.
Next item is a handset, a Nokia handset that was being used in the time of Ivan, right? And a current handset, a TCL 20E handset that is being used right now.
I think you need to see this.
Yes.
Yeah, the Nokia. Put them together.
Put them together, the old and the new. So while they're depositing the items in the time capsule, one of the interesting facts that I would like to share is that Jamaica's experience with Hurricane Ivan, the case for mitigation and preparedness programs written by Dr. Barbara Carby about Ivan, I believe that is also there as well. And you will remember that during the 1990s, Cable and Wireless undertook a systematic program of placing much of their telephone line network underground. As a result, there was minimal loss of telephone service during and after Ivan. According to the report, this had benefits beyond the obvious economic ones for the company. In the absence of a fully functioning emergency radio telecommunication system, telephones were the most reliable means of communication for the National Emergency Operations Center at ODPEM. Without the telephone service, it would have been impossible, totally impossible, for the center to manage the response and to maintain contact with parishes. So may I now invite Matthew. Matthew played a very pivotal role, and he's going to be joined by his son, Max Bragnell. He was very instrumental in the establishment of CRIF. He was a member of the team, and much of what we see as CRIF and parametric insurance would have been part of the feasibility and pre-feasibility study, which was done by the then CGM Gallagher group. So Matthew, you can come and share with us what you're putting in the time capsule.
I'm just, I don't want to steal any thunder here because it's a letter actually to my son Max, who's now in the business. I'm now semi-retired. Just outlining what Sandra and I did in the feasibility study at the outset. Also, I want to include a cap from CGM Group, which was the company which has morphed into Gallagher 2 or 3 times since and doesn't exist anymore. All right.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And I believe Max will open that that package.
It is addressed to Max.
It is addressed to Max.
I don't want to give too much detail.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Matthew and Max. So the youth is represented here today, and I will invite Mr. Patrick Burke, a CRIF postgraduate scholar, student at the UA. Patrick, one of our 2023 CRIF scholars, studying for an MBA in risk management at the Mona School of Business. Today, Patrick represents youth and CRIF's 175 scholarship winners over the years. Patrick is a former ward of the state, a very inspiring young man from very humble beginnings. Patrick is quoted as saying that the reality is that being in a boys' home was a constant battle, mentally, physically, and emotionally, especially because education was never viewed as an important subject. However, I did not allow what I went through to affect my futuristic goal. He's here today as a beacon of hope for so many, and in 2044, he will open this letter he wrote to himself.
I think Patrick deserves another round of applause. He's not only a master's student and a former ward of the state, but he also has a first-class honors in actuarial science. I think it's someone that Minister Clark should take note of for the Ministry of Finance. Ward of the State, first-class honors in actuarial science, and MSc in risk management, right? Yes. CRIF scholar. Our final depositor is our very own Jamala Alexander. Jamala has a long history with CRIF. Today, Jamala places in the time capsule a jump drive with a video that details her journey with CRIF. Like Patrick, she's come from very humble beginnings. She was a CRIF undergraduate scholar, a CRIF postgraduate scholar. She was a CRIF intern twice, and now she works with CRIF. Jamala? And she's also a youth representative. So thank you all. I did ask for the drinks to come, but I don't see them. I think they're now jumping up. So please have a drink with us. Please have a drink with us, have some food, and also have some cookies. Dr. Davis, you're not running away. No. Please have a drink with us, and everyone upstairs, please join us downstairs